Hello crafty friends and welcome back to my channel. Today I have not one but two cards that I created using the Sketched Clover Stamp Set by Simon Says Stamp. Both of the cards that I created today use the exact same focal point images and sentiments, but the end products are absolutely different. I have one card which is so colorful and vibrant with lots of ink smooshing, while the second one is more of my style with a clean and simple card front with just one focal point and a sentiment and some splatters to add some visual interest. Before we get started, I would really appreciate if you could take a minute to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so that you get notified every time I post a new video. Let us first take a look at the Sketched Clover Stamp Set. This set includes a variety of sketched 3 and 4 leaf clovers drawn with delicate parallel lines, which gives it a very modern and artistic look. This also includes some sentiments which would be perfect not just for St. Patrick's Day but can be used throughout the year. We have sending love and lucky vibes, you're my lucky charm, lucky to know you, may your blessings outnumbered the shamrocks that grow, and happy St. Patrick's Day. Well, the first card that I'm sharing here is one with a beautiful, vibrant green background. I have an A2 size panel of watercolor cardstock and a little plastic sheet which will be the carrier for our ink smooshing. I will be using some watercolors for this technique. I have my Altenew watercolor brush markers. This is a spring garden set from which I will be using two shades of green. I have emerald and moss. Now, ink smooshing is a very forgiving technique. Well, this is not something that you would do if you're looking for a very clean and perfection look on your card front. But this is absolutely perfect if you want any kind of a very natural or organic looking colors layered across your background. All I do here is add a couple of drops of the watercolor onto the plastic sheet and spray this with water. Now, depending on how deep or intense the color you want on your cut front, you can spray just a little bit of water or heavy-handedly put drops of water just to disperse all that color. Now, since we are using watercolors, these are already very flowy, so I just sprayed a couple of times before transferring the ink onto the watercolor panel. Well, there is really no right or wrong way to do this. Once I was done with a lighter shade of green, I cleaned my surface and heat set this layer of color before moving on to the next darker shade of green. I repeated this technique of alternating between the light and the darker shades of green until I was completely satisfied with how the color had been layered over this background. You can also use your dye inks for this technique since they are water reactive. Well, if I'm not using watercolors, I would prefer using the Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated inks, which are not just great for stamping, ink blending, and stenciling, but since they are water reactive, I could also use it to watercolor and also for ink smooshing. Now, I wanted to add some shine to the panel. For that, I'm using my fossilized amber distress wet spray. Well, that's a tongue twister. This is a perfect blend of this beautiful yellow golden pearlized pigment in a clear fluid base spray. Just like I did with my watercolors, I added a few drops onto the plastic sheet and smooshed it all over my background. I later went ahead and took my splatter box and sprayed the panel a couple of times for a more intense shimmery look. Well, the spray doesn't take a long time to dry, but since we had a lot of watercoloring and all that shimmer spray, I did give it at least 15 to 20 minutes to make sure that my panel is completely dry before I went ahead and stamped the clover leaves onto this beautiful background. Once my panel was completely dry, I placed it on my stamp platform and using my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, I stamped all of those clover leaves over this background. I lay the leaves in such a way that I would have enough space to stamp even the stems, making sure that it does not look very cluttered. These stamped leaves may have been the focal point of our card front, but I didn't want all that beautiful background to disappear with all that stamping. I could also stamp just one of those clover leaves and call it the main focal point of my card. But I think I really love the idea of having a black stamped image on this beautiful, vibrant background. Once I was done stamping on my background, I stamped the sentiment which says lucky to know you. I did a gradient stamping here using my positively saturated inks in the shade Pine and Field. Well, I think my camera must have died at this point of time, which is why I don't have a recording for that. but the light and dark shade of greens gives my sentiment an ombre look, which I think matches perfectly with my background. Now that all of our components were ready, all we had to do is assemble this card. Using some foam tape, I adhered the panel onto a top folding A2 size card base. I also popped up my sentiment strip and placed it on the lower left hand corner of this card front. I love how beautiful this card turned out and how shiny and vibrant it looks. Well, I think this is a card design and a technique that I would be using more often in future, with some bright and shiny colorful backgrounds and a solid black image covering the entire card front. Moving on to card number 2, which is more of a clean and simple card project, which is something that I like creating personally. Well, I used one of the 4 leaves clover image and stamped it towards the top of our A2 size card panel. Using my positively saturated ink in the shade pine, I stamped this image, and well, I did place my sentiment just to make sure that there is enough room for both the focal point and my sentiment. Now, using the same shade, I also stamped the thin stem. Well, sorry my head gets in the way here, but I wanted to make sure that the stem is properly aligned with my clover. Once my focal point was ready, next I stamped the same sentiment, which is lucky to know you, using VersaFine Onyx black ink. Now, while stamping a sentiment or anything that needs to be properly aligned, I like to use my grid transparency sheet. Well, I did mention that this card is going to be very clean and simple. Now that our focal point and sentiments are stamped, we could call this card done. But well, even a clean and simple card needs slight splatter on it. So I went ahead and added black and green watercolor splatters to match our focal point and the sentiment. Also, well, I thought about card number 1 here, so I had to add some gold metallic splatter as well. I kept the splatters to the bare minimum, making sure that it does not cover my focal point or the sentiment. Once my panel was dry, I adhered it onto a top folding A2 size card base, which is green in color. Well, I used some foam tape to pop up this panel. I love how beautiful this card turned out. It is a very clean and simple look. I have done this for many of my projects. A simple floral stamp or a die cut piece paired with a beautiful sentiment is all that we need for a beautiful card front. Now here's the difference between card number 1 and 2. One which is really colorful and vibrant, and the second one which is really clean and simple. Let me know in the comments down below which is your style of crafting. Is it bright and colorful or clean and simple? Well, all the supplies that I used in today's video will be linked down in the description box below. Note that all of those links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe.